Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
As my stepdaughter would say, the bougie water. I don't even know what bougie means, but Dan, thanks for coming back. I appreciate
it's a pleasure.
We were a little short on time your first trip, and I was having such a good time. I said, I got to have you back like soon, so I appreciate you carving out some time.
Oh, man, no worries at all. It was, we got into some weird esoteric places last time that we probably should just kind of avoid today.
You're just overcritical of yourself. And I think that's natural with people in podcasts, too. They're so because I was in the beginning, so self-critical of what they did. Oh my God, I talked too much about this, or I went this direction. And in the end, it's real and it's good. They just can't see it. To give it a little time and space between the event and when they look at it, they realize it's good. But it was very good.
I appreciate
very well received show. Today, I want to talk more about photography in general.
Sure.
We'll get a little geeky maybe for a bit, but in that conversation, I want to maybe make the show a little useful for those who have either never done know what 35 millimeter means, but they never have done 35 millimeter photography, and how the whole industry has had a seismic change from going from traditional mirror reflex cameras to mirrorless now.
Sure.
And that's, if you can make that maybe palatable for those who really don't know the ins and outs of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. And then I definitely want to get into your travels.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
You do that?
Yeah, man, for sure.
On the photography end. Okay.
Yeah.
Give us the just take us back to DSLR 101.
Gosh, DSLRs.
Talk through the evolution of film, because you shot a lot of film too, and then you saw the evolution of digital.
Yeah, so I was kind of early when I started shooting. So the reason I picked up a camera goes back to travels. I was in Rwanda in 2001, and my parents had given me for Christmas, maybe a year or two before that, a little Canon Rebel film camera.
Okay.
And then I got invited to go to Rwanda. So Rwandan genocide in 1994, nearly 1 million people murdered in 100 days, Hutus and Tutsis. And the world just sat by it and watched.
Of course.
Not enough resources to get involved. So fast forward a few years, and I'm in Rwanda. I fly into Kigali, the capital, and I head north to Rungeri, which is near the Congolese border, near Volcano National Park, where the silverback gorillas are. So we're about an hour from there. We're an hour or so from Lake Kivu in the Congo. And I'm working, my work there is supposed to be working with the Episcopal Diocese of the northern Rungeri province to open a school called Sunrise School for Orphans. And I'm thinking, I'm 18 years old, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Rwanda and work at this boarding school for orphans in the genocide. Only to get there and realize that nothing moves at a normal rate of speed in developing countries.
Right.
Particularly not after a civil war. The money's not there. The reliance on government funding to produce things, to bring in power, to bring in water is a waiting game. So you get it takes years to get permission, and it takes years to get the commitment to get water and power, and then they say yes, and then it happens months after it's scheduled.
It's insane, man. It's insane.
Yeah, so I'm in Rwanda, and I'm overwhelmed. I mean, just absolutely overwhelmed. I'm visiting mass graves where there's thousands of bodies left as they fell in churches. I'm seeing thousands of skulls stacked upon each other, and I am overwhelmed. And in the midst of that, you're on malaria medication, and I'm having nightmares. And
malaria medication.
Totally out of my element. The food is uncomfortable for me.
Okay.
I'm 18 years old from Western Pennsylvania in the country, and I am overwhelmed, physically, visually, emotionally, and environmentally. I mean, I'm in the land of 1,000 hills, which is as beautiful as it gets. Rwanda in 2001 is not Rwanda of today. Rwanda of today is becoming a small tech center. There, to an extent, and because it's so isolated, you're seeing technologies that are developing because it's hard to get into and hard to get out of, and so you can really start to work on projects. But in 2001, it's just different for me. It's hot during the day. It's rainy. It's this red clay. I'm the only white guy in the town that I'm in.
Sounds a little bit miserable.
And just overwhelmed. I mean, I loved it, and it's an experience that I think helped to shape me. But in the meantime, I've got this camera, and I'm taking snapshots. And I think that I'm going to go and do this amazing photojournalistic work, and I don't have the first clue about taking pictures. I don't have the first clue about composition, about compression, about focal length, about moments. All I know is that I'm overwhelmed, and my photos show it.
And this is a film camera, mind you.
This is a film camera.
This is not digital.
So I come back with 18 rolls of film, 20 rolls of film. I'm supposed to be there for 3 months. 2 months, I'm overwhelmed. I can't take it. I come home.
Okay.
Part of that is because the boarding school was supposed to open when I arrived, and it didn't open for 6 months after I had left. So it was 9 months behind schedule. And there just wasn't a lot to do. There were no students. We got the beds put together. Things were ready, but you had to we were waiting for electrical hookups and water hookups and the final approval for students to move in. And so I was just overwhelmed. I get to go up and trek into the Silverback Gorilla, see the Silverback Gorillas. And the day that we're up there, about 11 miles away, 4 UN workers are killed by Hutu militia. My mom's freaking out. And again, I look at the photos and I don't have a good photo. I have 2 or 3 photos from the trip that I'm like, okay, there's something there, but it's not there.
Okay.
So I come back and I look at that and I realize I'm not a good photographer. I go off to school for a couple of years. I get into some trouble, take some time off. And then it's about 2004 that I decide I want to go to school for journalism. And at that point I decide I don't want to spend my life writing. I want to spend my life shooting pictures. So I pick up a film camera, a Canon at that time, and just start shooting pictures primarily of polo and motorsports and boxing. Working at a nightclub, so I'm shooting pictures in the bar. And this is all pre-digital. And then I run into a buddy of mine, Ray Bradlaugh, who works at Ritz Camera downtown.
Okay.
And we start talking cameras, or he's in the downtown or North Hills. And at the time, he's like the first guy I know who is actually shooting digital. So, and shooting digital with professional cameras. So he's got some D2Hs and 400 2.8s and 85 1.4s. I mean, he's got a real kit, and I don't have anything. So I'm in school at Point Park, and he starts, as I start to make the transition to digital, he said, you really need to look at, just go Nikon. Like I've got gear you can use.
Yeah.
You can pick up a D200 for this much, or you can pick up a D2H for this much. And the D200 was a bigger camera, more megapixels, but the D2H was a tank.
Yeah.
You shot with one.
Yeah. I have it. 2HS.
Yeah, you have the HS. I had the H. It was a crop sensor. It was awful over 1600 ISO. Most people would argue it was awful over 400 ISO. Coming from, as I started to develop the journalistic side, ISO wasn't important anymore. I realized that it was about
used
capturing.
to be called ASA.
Yeah, ASA in the film.
Day, yeah.
And then even before that, there was another terminology that I'm drawing a blank for.
It's just how sensitive the sensor is to light. Right?
Yeah, so it's the ISO standard. It's the light sensitivity at a given speed of film. And then you move into like wet plate collodion, where it might be ISO or ASA of 4.
Right.
Versus 64
right.
or 200 ISO or
it's the old film, old slide film.
Yes,
you go down to like 25, right?
I think so. And then as you move into wet plate, it's even lower because it's actual chemicals that you're mixing on and then pouring onto a plate to expose. And so you might have 30 seconds.
But it's so
exposures.
creamy and so good.
And it's beautiful. So at that time, digital was taking off and film was cheap, and I missed out the chance to buy some Hasselblads and things that. I could have bought a couple of Leicas back in the day for pennies on the dollar because people were just dumping everything. You could have had a Hasselblad 500.
But now it's in again.
Now it's in, and now that same camera that I could have bought for a couple $100 is a couple of $1,000.
Sure.
So that's what kind of drove my desire to start learning to shoot pictures. So I went to school at Point Park for print journalism. Took the photography classes that I could, started shooting, and then came out of that.
Okay.
We met a few years after that.
Your nightclub era.
Yeah. So we're working in bars and we're shooting pictures and we're just basically making money to go out and have drinks and have some fun and meet some people and see some cool shows and
right.
And that's about it. Yeah, so that all came out of a trip to Rwanda that made me realize how awful I was. Because around the same time, a local Pittsburgh photographer, Martha Ryle, who was at the Post-Gazette at the time, she won the Pulitzer for her work of Rwandan refugees heading to Burundi.
Okay.
And that was on a trip where I think her sister was working over there. And so, I'm in the same area in the same period of time, and there's a night and day difference between photographs. And
Got
I'm
it.
saying,
Got it.
This is somebody who's a photojournalist. This is somebody who's a photographer, not just a person with a camera.
Right.
And I'm a person with a camera.
Right.
And I don't want to be a person with a camera. I wanted to be a photographer. We still have a lot of people with cameras that make a lot of money as photographers today.
No doubt.
But when you look at what inspires me, there are those who are awesome at business, and there's those who are terrible at business but amazing at taking pictures. And then there's an even smaller sect of those who are awesome at business and amazing at taking photos and creating. And I'd like to get to that point. I feel like I'm good at taking pictures and I'm mediocre at business. But I'm better than where I was, which was awful at taking pictures and awful at business. So we're progressing slowly. So we started off with cameras like you have over there, the Nikon D2Hs and D3Ss, and up until last year I was using a Nikon D5, which was their flagship sports camera at the time.
Okay.
So that's a mirrored camera. It's big, it's bulky, it's heavy. It has a mirror that actually you see through the lens, which projects a reversed image upside down. The mirror then reverses the image again, so you see it the proper way.
Right.
And then today we're using mirrorless cameras, which are like these Sonys and Fujis and Panasonics, and they take away
they're
the
lighter.
They're lighter. They're
thinner.
smaller. The profile is smaller. They're not always smaller.
Okay.
Leica makes a camera. Leica's mirrorless cameras are big.
Okay.
They're built like tanks. Even their SLR styles versus their rangefinder styles. SLR being you look through the lens.
Right.
A rangefinder being you're looking through a different box that has outlines of the framing.
Right.
And the parallax is supposed to be corrected, so you're essentially seeing most of what's in there.
Right.
But yeah, the technology has gotten to the point now where a camera that's the size of an old Nikon FG can shoot 20 frames a second.
It's just 20 pictures a second.
100,000 ISO and produce a usable image.
Yeah.
And so now you can have two cameras and a couple of lenses in a kit that weighs less than your traditional one camera, two lens kit.
Yeah, it's changed.
Which is amazing.
It's amazing. It is amazing.
So it's not like as the cameras get smaller, the lenses necessarily get smaller.
Well, hold on a second. Take this and just for film comparisons, the size difference between those two.
So this is the Nikon D3S, which is still an amazing camera with a 50 millimeter lens. This was the standard in 2012. Then they replaced it with the D5, the D4, D4S, D5, and then just last year the D6, which is still the same camera. This is the Sony A9, which has been replaced by the A9 II. This camera shoots 12 frames a second. This Sony shoots 20 frames a second.
It's crazy. The size difference is insane.
And they both have a 50 millimeter lens on them. I'm actually using a Nikon manual 50 millimeter lens on here.
Right.
So the lens is even smaller when you take it off of the adapter.
Wow.
But what's really cool about these little mirrorless cameras is the legacy glass. So you can put almost any lens, if it has manual focus capabilities, on this. You can use old Contax Zeiss medium format lenses on here, or Hasselblad lenses. You can put Leica lenses on here.
Yeah.
So you're going to spend more on the Leica lens than on the camera, but you can put the best lenses in the world on here, and they don't even have to be modern.
Right.
So you can use a lens from the 1950s, which is really cool. And then you have your modern 85 1/8s and 35 1/8s, which are tiny and small, and everything that you need. The autofocus is amazing on them. And these cameras shoot video, and they shoot photo.
Do you still find them as rugged? Like, do you still find
they are not as rugged?
They're not.
I don't care
rugged.
what anybody says.
More
they will survive,
bend.
but they're, you need to pound in a tent stake. This is going to work, and it's going to shoot pictures afterwards.
And the old D2X was that way too.
Yeah, these these are workhorse cameras, and they're heavy, and they're heavy duty, and they're meant to have, these are what 90% of the press pool was
Right.
using up until recently.
Right.
Because they just can take abuse.
Yeah.
You could get launched across a room by an explosion, and the chances are the camera's still going to work.
Yeah. I remember your D2, it was just beat up, and it was really worn, like visually worn.
Yeah,
that was your baby, too.
and it took a ton of abuse, and it still works. I mean, it's still, the mirror's starting to go in it, and the first shot that I take with it, the mirrir locks up, and then I have to turn it off and turn it on, and then it works until it doesn't again. And
They
then
can
you have to
repair that stuff, right?
They can. I mean, that D3S is still one of the best cameras made. I know photographers are still using the baby version of that, the Nikon D700, because it works. The image, I have one at home. The image quality of it is not anywhere nearly as good as the newer cameras. It's a 2010, 2011 camera.
Yeah.
But it's got a beautiful image.
I thought the 300S was really punchy and contrasty. I liked it.
Yeah, it had a real high level of saturation on it.
I thought so, yeah.
And today with Lightroom and Photo Mechanic and
all the software,
Capture One, the editing is, when we went digital, we actually ended up taking on more work upon ourselves, because you don't just shoot and then send it out to a lab who matches it to your specs. But we have a lot more control. So for the average consumer anymore, I think that, this was a $4,900 camera that I picked up used for $1,500 or something.
Wow.
$2,000, $2,100.
Which is still the very best way to buy photo equipment.
But you can still go and pick up cameras like this where maybe the autofocus isn't quite as good, but for the average consumer, it's not necessary, for under $2,000. And you have an amazingly robust camera system. So the video quality out of this is amazing. It shoots
That's the
4K,
game changer,
it shoots 120 frames a second. It's a do it all. But what's really amazing is that I can carry 2 cameras like this and 3 lenses and a microphone, and I can put it in a satchel. Whereas before, 2 cameras, 3 lenses, and a microphone, 2 D2Xs or D3Xs.
You need a full camera bag.
You're carrying your cameras on you, your shoulders are getting tired, but you still need another bag just to carry a lens around.
Right.
So not to say that when you get into the big zooms, your 2.8 zooms are the same size as they are with Nikon and Canon.
Yeah, that's physics, though.
And the Canon mirrorless lenses are still big. They have a 50 f1.2, and Nikon has a 50 f1 manual. The lenses are huge. The image circles are bigger.
I always used to say, though, was that extra half stop, quarter stop, was it worth it?
From 1 to 1.4, it's a full stop. So
yeah. But I mean, is it for that extra bit of light sensitivity?
It depends on what you're shooting.
I guess.
If you're shooting your kids at home, no.
Okay.
If you're shooting a wedding
in the dark,
it makes a difference. If you're looking to have a lens, there are lenses that people will spend an exorbitant amount of money on.
Because of the quality of the glass, right?
Because of the image that you get. So there's a couple that come to mind. The Canon 51.2 is a great lens. It's a beautiful lens. And then they had a Canon 50 f1 lens.
Okay.
That was autofocus as well. They're hard to find. They're big. They're slow. The image out of them is amazing. Is it the lens you want to grab every day? No. It's so slow to focus.
Yeah.
And the out of focus area is so thin. Then there's like the Nikon 200 f2, which was a massive sports lens, but when used for portraits was beautiful. The downside to it was it's so big that the minute you start shooting portraits with it, you lose all connection with your subject because you can't see them.
Got it.
Nikon has a 105 1.4 that's amazing. Canon had a 135 f2 that is absolutely beautiful. There's lenses that you buy and you spend the money on because of
the Nikon 85. I always thought 1.2 was always for a very
85 1.4 for Nikon.
Okay.
Canon had 85 1.2.
Okay.
Is
that an ultimate portrait lens, the 85 millimeter on a full frame sensor?
85 to 135 is kind of perfect,
Okay.
depending on your favorite working distance.
Okay.
105 is pretty spectacular.
Okay.
So Nikon has a 105 1.4 that's amazing. I think Sigma has one out now as well. For people who like a little bit more compression, like a little bit more working distance, it's perfect.
Right.
For if you're shooting available light on location, the ability to control depth of field and control what you see with that aperture.
Well, that's the
A 1.4 to a 1.8 makes a difference. A 1.2 to a 1.8 makes a huge difference.
And that's, I always would say, even when I was really into it, when we knew each other as an amateur, the difference to me between a photographer and someone taking pictures is the understanding of the tool. I mean, the understanding of depth of field, the understanding of light. That composition certainly, but that lack of depth of field knowledge always to me seems to be the giveaway of someone that really knows what they're doing or doesn't.
Or it becomes the crutch in which they. I've got a friend, Terry Clark, who I was actually just chatting with this morning because he's retiring from commercial work, from like chasing clients, but the guy's an amazing photographer. And we've had these conversations when I was assisting him. Why are you shooting at f8? Well, there's this architectural aspect to it that I want. So we see more and more photographers shooting at 1.4 and 1.8. Wide open. Background is blurred out with just the subject in focus.
That gets a bit much, though.
And it becomes a beautiful image.
Can.
But when you look at somebody who is shooting street scenes, where when you look at photojournalists who are trying to capture a scene, and they're shooting with a little bit more depth of field because they need to show more. And they're allowing the lights and the shadows or compositional tools such as lines. When your only compositional tool is depth of field, it's amazing for portraits, for close-ups.
Yeah.
It puts all the emphasis on the subject. But when you're looking to tell more of a story, where you're bringing in multiple elements, there's multiple people doing things, the way that people are lining up, that becomes the ability to understand how and to compose with those elements becomes much more important.
Okay.
And there's folks who are great at that, and there's folks who struggle with that. In portraiture, I think that having a shallower depth of field 95% of the time is the way to do it.
Okay.
But if I'm trying to show a portrait of somebody, if I'm trying to shoot a portrait of an artist with their artwork, and I blur out their artwork, did I shoot a portrait of now it's just a portrait of a person. It's not. They're not an artist because you don't see that.
Yeah.
If it's an architect,
context is wrong,
and the architect isn't in place, and you can't see place. You lose the context and you lose that connection to the world around.
No doubt.
There's days where it's really easy and there's days where it's really hard. And there's days where it works and there's days where it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, that's when you just say, I'm just going to shoot this shallow. And I'm going to look for an expression.
Yeah.
But then the other times are when you want to really show a sense of place.
Okay.
And if you're just shooting at 1.8 or 1.4, are you seeing enough of the place? With a wide lens, you can get away with that. But with a long telephoto where you're compressing and your background is out of focus, you can lose that. So
it's shallower.
I think that more and more I realize the equipment doesn't make the photographer. I've got a buddy, Michael Williamson, who Washington Post, and our kids are close in age. And but Michael, if you know the song Youngstown, Bruce Springsteen, Michael and one of his friends are responsible for that song.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're Dale Maheridge and Michael Williamson.
Wow.
Their photo essays and book about Youngstown are what inspired that song.
Okay.
Michael can pick up his iPhone and shoot a portrait that I can't shoot. He's that good. He's got multiple Pulitzers. His ability to see and empathize. He'll sit with somebody and talk for 2 hours before he ever picks up a camera, and then he'll make a beautiful portrait. He'll find a location and wait for somebody to walk through at the right moment, and he knows what he wants before he presses a shutter. So a lot of his work is inspired by paintings.
Right.
And so understanding composition and how that works together, he has a better understanding of that than most. So when you see that, you just say, man, like, how did you get that? It's, well, I sat there for an hour waiting for. I think to a picture of a woman in a red. I think she had a burqa on or a red headpiece and red dress, and she's walking through D.C. And this was during one of the debates around a travel ban.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. And he had this, I think it was a yellow background, and he knew that he wanted it to be colorful. And he had seen this woman earlier in the day, and he was like, she has to be coming back this way eventually. So he sat there and he waited. And the framing works up to where you've got this beautiful red dress against this beautiful background. Compositionally, it's gorgeous, but he knew what he wanted and he waited for it. And yet you watch him go out there and cover a medical bust in rural West Virginia.
Right.
And the story has this empathy and this connection to those who are so desperate for any help that they can get.
Sure.
He did a story about kids who were they got free meals on the bus because their families didn't have food.
Got it.
So they would get on the bus on the way to school and they would get a free meal.
Right.
And then he did a story. He was on the story. I think he went to the family of the kid who killed the folks at Ebenezer Baptist, and was able to connect with them, even though their political views were totally different. He was able to connect with the humanity of them, and spent a couple of days with them. So there's I can make a picture, and then there's I can make a picture.
Right. Right.
To make a picture, you have to have a sense of empathy and a sense of connection, and be willing to put away your own opinions and just talk to people about who they are. You don't have to agree with them, but you have to be willing to have that connection and put yourself out there. So I'm not to that level. I don't know if I'll ever get to that level. I look at that and I'm envious. But I can make an okay picture. So yeah. I mean, there's photos that you look back through of your kids that you have a connection with,
right? Because
it may not be the perfect photo, but it's the perfect moment of that memory or of that day.
And perfect is such a subjective word too.
But for you, it's perfect.
Right.
And
right. Amen.
So, I have pictures of my daughter and my wife that are really meaningful to me. That may not be the perfect photo. They may be a little bit out of focus. They might not be sharp. The exposure may be off a little bit, but there's a moment there. Maybe they're blurry. Well, if it's a picture of my daughter running to my wife and she's out of focus and she's blurry because she's running,
it shows motion.
It's motion, but it also just is like that memory of like, oh,
certainly
that was that when she jumped into her arms, or so I think that the photography has, we can use the tools as a crutch, or we can just say, it doesn't matter what tool we have. When you hit that level of being able to find moments, it doesn't matter what tool you have. You could have a point and shoot camera,
right?
Now, if you're that good,
I remember a very specific conversation we had, pretty much on the same vein years ago, and you were lamenting that the iPhone had just come out. I want to say 2007, first generation iPhone, and you said that it was either Chase Jarvis or somebody that you were following their work online, and they had shot an entire something with an iPhone, and you were so amazed at like the compression, the small file size, the limited quality of glass in the camera, and none of that mattered because their composition was so good.
There's there's the best camera is the one that's with you. So if it's an iPhone, it doesn't matter what it is, and that's what Chase. He had the app. I think it was called the Best Camera app at the time, and it was all about trying to get people to use the tool that they have with them at that moment. Some people have a camera with them all the time.
Right.
Some people have an iPhone. We're in a society now where I think they said there's almost 100 million images a day being taken or something
crazy.
Like that. Are being shared. As we're almost desensitized to good photography.
No question. Let's talk about that.
But we see amazing moments every day. If you think about a photo being a recording of time, we're recording more moments than have ever been recorded in the history of man. It makes it harder to stand out because you have to have a clear voice. You have to have a clear connection. You have to grow a business more than ever. You don't have to be a good photographer anymore. You have to be a person that people want to connect with. You have to have a vision that people connect with.
Absolutely right.
It's this studio, man. It's you've got a vision, and your vision
Blurry maybe,
but your vision didn't matter to anybody else until you started it.
Yeah.
You made the vision yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
And you're doing it the way that you want to do it, and people are resonating with that.
Yeah, and that's
Photography's the same
rewarding.
way.
And that's rewarding. Yeah, I mean, I think if you create something, it's just like it's the creator's dream. Right? Create whatever you create, whatever comes out of your head that other people find value of any form. That's what you're hoping for.
Yeah.
It isn't always currency you're looking for. It isn't even reaffirmation. It could just be a head nod. It could be someone giving you a minute of their time, their attention. That's validation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we hit this point where it's our job as photographers is still to produce good art. But more importantly, in order to make it sustainable, we have to connect with people.
Yes.
So you don't have to be the best.
Right.
But what you do has to be better than what somebody else does. So what is your niche? What is your differentiator? If you're a therapist for somebody,
Right.
and letting them talk, or maybe you're a portrait photographer who is really efficient at working on location and able to make sure that every person who comes in front of your camera at a corporation, even if it's only for 2 or 3 minutes, feels awesome.
Yeah.
Connecting with people quickly, or you're somebody who just loves to dive deep into a family and spend a lot of time preparing them and working with them to see just their exact vision. More than ever now, you have to have a unique differentiator than you do have to be a great photographer.
Right.
Because the average consumer today doesn't care about the best photo. They care about the experience that resonates with them the most.
Good point. Was it always that way, though? Or is it just now more than ever?
I don't want to sound old or, bash on anybody. I think that it's now more than ever. I think that before you could set up a studio in a town and you might have been the only game in town. The barrier of entry was much higher.
Exactly right. There
Today,
was a cost involved with that, and then a unique skill level
and
the average person had no entry to.
Sure, and there's a cost level with it today. I mean, cameras are more expensive today than they've.
Okay.
I would say they're as expensive, if not more expensive, than they ever were.
Real cameras.
Yeah, professional grade cameras, but you don't need a professional grade camera to make the work. So, before you would have, if you were a photojournalist and you were starting out, you might have had a Nikon FM with a couple of manual focus lenses. Well, the studio photographer down the street, and that might have cost you a couple $100. The studio photographer down the street might have had
medium format
with a Hasselblad or a Pentax, and maybe they had a couple of grand into it. Maybe they had upwards of 10 grand into it.
Right.
Today, there's people who are just starting out in their businesses who are dropping $10,000, $15,000 on camera equipment.
Right.
Or they're buying 2 generations old. But the reality is it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
The image, but for whatever reason, you had less people. Okay. Digital is definitely part of that. You can go in and you can learn much faster. You're not burning through money to learn.
Yeah.
With film, every frame costs you money.
Right.
Every frame with a client costs you money. So when you might have only shot a roll or two of film or 2 or 3 rolls of 120 with medium format with a client because that was what was expected. You charge them a lower entry fee to get in.
Right.
You charge them a lot for the prints. Today, somebody who's never picked up a camera can go and spend a couple of $1,000s or less. I could go and build out a kit that I'd be happy shooting on for under $1,000.
Which is just crazy.
And it's
crazy.
And that could be a Nikon D700, which was an expensive camera at the time, with say a Nikon 35 f2, a Nikon 50-1.8, and a Nikon 85-1.8. And you'd have under $1,000 into that system. And in 2012, that camera was a top-of-the-line camera.
It's crazy.
You could go pick up a Nikon D3S for $800. It was a $5,000. It was a $5,800, $5,900 camera when it was new.
I could pay $600 for that last year.
And it's just as good today as it was then.
I know.
But when you compare it with today, it's a lot. But
is it? I mean, really?
for low light, practically, if you're a photojournalist or a wedding photographer, practically speaking,
yes,
there's a difference.
Okay.
But only if you rely solely on the camera.
Got it.
So take that camera for $600, and why not just go pop 2 strobes into a room? And all of a sudden, now you don't need to be at 8,000 ISO. You can be at 6,400 or 5,000.
Almost see in the dark, right? Right.
So the barrier of entry is you go and buy a Nikon D3S with a 51.4 and an 85.18 and a 24.18 or 28.18 or whatever, 35, and you don't really need more than a 35 and a 50 for documentary work.
Right.
Those are the 2 focal lengths that people kind of live and die by. And for a portrait, you don't need much more than 85. So if all 3 of those can be an amazing kit that for under $1,000 in lenses and under $1,000 in camera,
right,
you have a 1 camera 3 lens kit, and you throw in another $600 and you pick up a second D3S, and now you have a 2 camera 3 lens kit for not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So does the equipment matter? And if you've never picked up a camera before, give yourself a year of shooting everything in front of you,
right,
and taking your images home and looking at them and learning to edit. It doesn't cost you any more money.
Got it.
To make those 10,000 frames could be 6 months and no more additional money. 10,000 frames in a film day was a lot of money.
It break you, yeah.
So that's why we have more and more photographers. We also have more and more creativity, I feel like, than ever before. People are using mirrors and crystals, and they're shooting through reflective surfaces because you can just play with it. I can go and I can shoot through a lava lamp. Well, if it doesn't work, it didn't cost me anything.
Right.
But if it works, if I can get it to work the way I want it to, all of a sudden
you can experiment.
I've made something that I haven't seen before.
Exactly right.
So I find it exciting. I don't want to sound old. I think that there's a lot of folks who got frustrated because everybody's a photographer.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's a photographer. The difference is, to make a living at it today, you have to work harder.
There's no question.
You have to be different.
Differentiate yourself.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not different because I have better equipment or because I have a better website. I could have a terrible website and be a jerk and have no clients. I could be an amazing photographer and be a jerk and have no clients.
Right. Right.
I could be a jerk, but people dig me, and I could be busy as could be, and my photography can be mediocre.
Yeah.
Or I could be the nicest guy in the world who cares about people, and people love me, and my work is mediocre at best.
Right.
But my clients love me and value me and hire me time after time after time and refer me because they care about me.
Yep. Made the connection.
You have to have a differentiator, and that differentiator has to resonate.
I want to know what your thoughts are in terms of being a professional photographer and watching the evolution of consumer grade equipment and how fucking good it's gotten. I mean, it has to be frustrating to a degree, right? Because
it doesn't bother me.
Okay, a lot of photographers are pissed off. I mean, I've read essays.
Yeah, I think they're the guys who are having a hard time.
I would think so. It comes with levels of entitlement too. Like there's no entitlement to be a photographer. It's a skill you learned in a
and it's a skill that, to be honest, a lot of consumers are far better photographers than a lot of professionals.
Yeah, it's very true.
A lot of amateurs and weekend shooters put far more effort into developing their craft than the professional, because they love it. They haven't lost that connection.
Yeah, I think a period of my life I was getting to that point where I just loved it so much that I didn't want to do it for a living. But man, I thought about it so often. I'm thinking to myself, I'm spending so much time doing this, I should probably go do it.
Yeah.
But
and then you look at landscape photographers, and they love it, and they don't have to be making money. Nobody else has to be seeing their work if they're making work for themselves.
That's exactly right.
I've got a buddy who his father left him a beautiful Leica collection, and so he picked up a used Leica digital, and he's using these amazing 50-year-old Elmerit lenses and Leica lenses, and he's shooting for himself. He's not shooting for anybody else, and he gets to go and make the work that he wants to make. He gets to carry the camera to the parties he wants to go to.
It's awesome.
Because he's doing it for him.
I love it. I can relate.
And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
Mm-hmm.
I know I know other folks who, I'll take my mom for example. She's an amateur photographer who loves nature,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't have great equipment. But people love her photography.
Mm-hmm.
They love looking at her pictures of, macro icicles on the stream, or the way that the dew is playing on a flower, and she's seeing that and she's doing it for herself.
Right.
Those are images that I wouldn't even think to shoot because it's not in my wheelhouse. But Freddie Koala
Bugs. He's shooting bugs.
is just shooting stuff in the back of his yard, and he's making some cool pictures because he wants to, and people dig it.
He's got passion for it.
But he's got no other reason to do it other than he wants to.
Right.
And he's probably putting in a lot more time to making pictures
Right.
than the average photographer is.
Right.
Because we don't shoot what doesn't make us money.
Got
We
it.
get that point where if it's not making us money, we're not doing it.
It's that blurry line in society where art meets commerce, where art meets sustenance. You have to, and it's a tough thing. And I've talked to enough visual artists and musicians and people that are in the art field, and it's how they live. And there has to be an internal struggle in there. Like for me, we've talked many times, I lost a little bit of the zeal and the love of the instrument when it became a commodity to me. I did. I can tell you I did. I just didn't play every day. I didn't do the things. And I think that I'm away from it now. I'm starting to fall in love with the instrument again because it's not attached to a money component.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just making art for the sake of making art. It's playing for the sake of playing.
Yeah.
It can be that moment where it's just 20 minutes of playing on a guitar to just give yourself a release and zen out. So, to me, the technology doesn't bother me at all.
Okay.
The more technology that makes its way into consumer technology, that means that the professional is just going crazy. I mean, we have on our iPhones 4K and 120 frames a second. Or 240 frames a second.
It's crazy.
You've got 3 lenses on an iPhone.
Crazy.
And people say, well, I can't make money. I mean, there's a photographer in India who, Sefi Bergeson, I think his name. He shot a high-end, very expensive wedding in India.
Okay.
On an iPhone. He had wanted to do it. He had his other photographers that work with him shooting on cameras.
Right.
But I think it's Sefi Bergeson, Israeli, living in India, shooting very high-end clients, Bollywood elites and wealthy elites, and he shot an entire wedding on an iPhone.
Which is insane.
Because he wanted to. You've got photographers that are working in conflict zones shooting on an iPhone because it isn't intimidating. People are natural. They're used to it. Everybody's shooting those pictures.
Right.
So the tool that works, it doesn't matter if it's a film point and shoot, or if it's an iPhone, or if it's a $65,000 phase 1. If you can't get people to allow you to make the picture that you want to make, it doesn't matter what you're using.
Good point. Yeah, and it's like the old story. It's you could buy a $20,000 Gibson guitar, but if you don't have it, if it's not here, and it's not here in your heart, if you don't have all that working,
and if you're not putting the time in, so
absolutely.
You could give me any guitar in here, and I can't make it sound like anything.
Yeah,
I love music.
Yeah,
but I haven't put any time into learning.
Right.
So unless I put the effort in, and unless I have a desire to do that, my wife hates when I practice harmonica because my dog starts to howl. I love the harmonica. I don't practice it because I don't want to hear my dog cry.
Only a few people can really play that damn thing good.
Right? I mean, John Popper and not many more.
That's pretty much it.
But it's one of those things where if you don't put the effort into it,
right?
If you're not making art, if you're a painter and you're not constantly working towards your vision,
right,
then you're just a painter.
Yep.
You're not anybody until you start to articulate what your vision is.
No doubt.
And photography is the same way. I feel like I'm a better photographer than a lot of photographers, but I haven't articulated my vision. I haven't built those relationships. I haven't put the energy into that. You get into a point where you're just, I've had the last year off since the newspaper. I've had an awesome year with my daughter. I've had a very small year of picking up a camera. I had a D700 and a 50 millimeter lens and a 17 to 35 Nikon. So I had very old equipment until I want to say October, maybe September, when I bought this Sony. I shot a lot of pictures this summer, but I didn't shoot a single picture of, I shouldn't say that. I think I shot 2 client jobs all summer.
Okay.
On that old equipment. And it felt good to shoot, but I had been shooting every day,
mm-hmm.
and I hadn't been focused on a vision. I had just been shooting what I had to. And I think it starts to show.
I believe that.
You look at Michael Williamson, who I talked about earlier. The guy is a kid with a camera.
Right.
He has to create every day.
Right.
It's
in him.
He might be driving, and this guy spends most of his days on the road. He might be driving and see an old church, and he'll come back at dusk, and he'll pull out the tripod, and he'll say, well, how do I light this? And he'll turn on the car and point the lights at one side and pull out a spotlight, and he'll paint this house, this church or this building to make a picture because it's dying to get outside of him. Most photographers aren't that way. Most artists aren't that way. When you're doing it professionally, you get to the point where you don't take it with you. It's when you're hired and you're not doing it the rest of the time.
Okay.
I mean, do you want to think about real estate all day long?
Yeah.
Or do you want to think about real estate when you're working?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can show that passion, if it carries through with you all the time,
yeah,
people are going to see that.
That's the key to life, though.
Yeah.
Be passionate for everything you do.
Yeah.
As often as you can. And we're all imperfect in that regards, but
yeah,
that has to be the key to life.
Yeah, it's got to be, let's just look at real estate. What differentiates you from the $10,000 real estate agents in the
it's just the
county?
It's the relationship with my client and the story. It starts and ends there.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it just is. I mean, to my viewpoint is there. Let's just say there's I'm just throwing a number out. Let's say there's 10,000 realtors in southwestern PA. To me, 7,000 of them are going to do an adequate job. 5,000 will do a pretty good job, and like 1,000 will be really, really good. And maybe 500 are exceptional. I want to be in the exceptional thing. I don't know if I'm there. I think I am, but I want to be in there because I know I'm passionate enough to be in there.
Right.
And if I'm not expressing myself in a productive way to clients to make them feel that I belong in that 500, shame on me.
Yeah.
I'm not doing my job, or else my eye's not on the prize.
Yeah, and that right there is what's so important. And so how do you keep yourself motivated with that? How do you go into a new client meeting and separate yourself?
Yeah. I think with experience, I don't know what it's like in your field, but with experience, to me, experience is wasted if you don't learn authenticity and you're not comfortable with it. Like, I am who I am, and I tell folks that, there's my father. I mean, Dan, you knew my dad a little bit from. He used to say, he said, "Son, you're an acquired taste." I never knew how to take that, but I am who I am, and I'm comfortable in my own skin, and it only comes with time, I think. But what I offer this client is the tenets of how I do business and my level of communication in that relationship, and that it either means something to them initially when we meet, or it doesn't. And I like to think the relationship's the most important thing for most potential clients. Some it won't be.
Yeah.
Could be price, could be something else. But I'm comfortable in my delivery, my presentation, and how I will take care of them. And I just have that level of confidence that comes with that I will do an amazing job, because that's what I do.
Sure.
You see?
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's not more complex to me than that.
Sure. And so as you're growing your business and you're asking for those referrals, you have to ensure that you're doing that job for every one of those clients, that you're making them feel amazing along the way.
Correct.
And it has to be something different. They can just call in and they can just take the first person they see to be their agent.
Right.
Or they can seek you out and say, hey, so-and-so told me you really worked with them on
It's
this.
extremely rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it's like, I know that everyone likes to be on both sides of the equation, but you said this in one of your videos that you did. A buyer needs to have their own agent representing them.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I've seen you do over the years was continually put out content that told people who you were.
Mm-hmm.
So when it was Boogie Street Guitars, you would have you'd record videos and you'd put those out on the Boogie
Primitive.
boards, and you showed people what you did.
Yeah.
You'd get in a shipment of guitars, and it could be one of those Parkers,
Mm-hmm.
and you would talk about how this is just this cool classic guitar.
That was so natural for me to do that.
Yeah,
It wasn't
but it's
like,
not everybody else. It's not Guitar Center. They never did that.
Right. Well, that's the thing I didn't understand, because when you are wired in this weird way that I'm wired, where I want to express the excitement I see in something and share it with people.
Yeah.
When you have that, yes, there can be a sales component of all that stuff. I had to learn all that. Like it was just in me. It had to come out. I'm still the same way. Like
Yeah.
I think if I see something amazing, or if I feel passionately about dual agency, why realtors shouldn't be dual agents, why it's not ethical, in my opinion, to represent the buyer and seller in a transaction. I think they're by nature, it's adversarial. It's a negotiation.
Yeah.
You can't give your best to both sides. That's unethical to me. I don't care if it's legal. It's unethical.
Yeah.
I can't do it, and I don't practice that. Now, if that's a sales pitch, if that's call it what you want. But I will not represent, if Mr. or Mrs. client want to work with me, know that I will never, ever take your interests and divide them with the other side.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I don't know if that's a sales, again, if it's sales pitch or not, but I'm passionate about principles, about what I do, and that's my craft, right? So I'm just passionate, and that comes out of me. I want to explain that, because I think a lot of people don't understand. I mean, it's important to me. Why is it important to you? I don't know.
Well, and what that also allows you to do is make a great referral to somebody else. Hey, we've got this house on the market. I've got somebody who wants to look at it. I'm the selling agent,
Right.
or I'm the listing agent, but I've got somebody I'm going to refer you because I don't believe in taking two clients.
It's a better way to live, man.
So
It's
now you get
ethics.
the referral.
It's ethics.
You create a new friend,
Right.
and you've
Right.
let your client and the potential client know that we're going to work the best way for you.
Right.
I'm going to refer you away,
Yeah.
and
Never lead with the money. Never
Yeah.
lead with the money. It has to be about the work. Like, I don't know. It's not an original concept, Dan, but it's, and maybe it's old school. Maybe I learned it from my dad and his dad, and I don't know. But never lead with the money in anything you do. Because I did not come from a family of salespeople. I didn't. I think my father would have been a hell of a salesperson. That wasn't his route.
sure.
But in business, never lead with the money. And I think too many people, too many influencers, too many young entrepreneurs, too many people that want to be involved in commerce, they see glitzy stuff in a society we're in, and they lead with the money.
Yeah.
And that's the mistake number one. It's got to be about the passion you have for anything.
Sure.
The money will follow behind if you do good work.
And I've made that mistake along the way.
We all do.
I've gotten to the point where it was like I just wanted to make money.
Sure.
And I want to make money. Now I want to be, but more importantly, and this is conversations I have with my wife recently, my job right now is a stay-at-home dad. Mm-hmm. That's a hard pill to swallow at times. It's the best job in the world, but it's very hard to not be working and providing. Mm-hmm. I would have been, I mentioned this last time, had I been working, we would have been in trouble. I would have been the one who was risking exposure every day.
Right.
My daughter would have had to spend time with her grandparents, and I would have been risking them to exposure every day.
It wasn't the pragmatic decision.
So it's a blessing that I've had this time, and I don't have a moment of regret for that. But I also realized along the way that I have to be creating. It's more than just I want to be successful, but it's more than just I have to make money. I have to be in the place of creation. Mm-hmm. And you get to the point sometimes, for me anyways, where I just stopped creating because the money wasn't coming in and I felt stagnant. And so having a period of time where I'm forced to step away made me realize if I'm creating because I have to, because I'm passionate about that, and I'm creating the work that I want to create, eventually the money will follow.
It always does.
If I'm only focused on the money and I'm feeling desperate, it shows. When I'm hungry, every person I talk to is going to say, man, he's desperate for that job.
Every day.
If I'm just looking to do the best work for them and create what they need, then that will show through.
No question.
At that point, my job is to make sure that I go above and beyond and over-deliver. If I deliver the bare minimum, they're going to remember that I charged them so much and I kind of gave them what they wanted. If I go above and beyond, then it's, oh, and by the way, this is what that's going to cost.
Right.
So
you got to make it feel
if we've got to dial that back a little bit, we can do that, but I'm not going to dial it so far back that we're not going to work together.
Right.
I don't want to be the cheapest.
Right.
I don't want to be racing to the bottom, but I want to be ensuring that what I give a client is the best photography experience that they have. If I'm working with you to brand you, then I need to know what makes Eric tick, what makes Eric different than every other realtor.
That's in addition to the photography. That's the part of what you do.
That's more important than the photography.
Okay. So that is where a lot of people enter business and they don't see the relationship aspect of every transaction. And I think that's just because we're in an automated world for the most part.
Sure.
We buy everything online. The interaction we have sometimes is just with the computer.
Yeah.
But I believe in things that require an emotional component to the decision.
Yeah.
If you do not get involved, or if you ignore the relationship or the potential relationship, you do it at your own peril because you are essentially putting the money first, and people will see it.
Yeah.
They feel it.
And if you're not able to help them realize the value in that, if I'm looking to photograph portraits, I love shooting portraits. We shot a portrait last week here.
Right.
That was just like a quick grab the camera and do that.
Yep.
And we'll do another one later on that's lit. But if I'm not talking to you and connecting with you, and it's just me coming in and you just want me out of here, but you just need a picture, that's going to come through. It's not going to leave it's going to leave a bitter taste, especially if it's not exactly what you want. If we've talked about it and we're having a hard time getting that vision just right, but we're really working towards that, then it may not be the image that we had envisioned, but if we're capturing authenticity, that people can see through that, that's the most important part.
Without question.
We don't have to be the best at what we do for every part of it.
Right.
We have to be the best at what we do in one or two important areas, whether that's client relationships, whether that's planning and following up with people and helping them feel like they don't even have to think about it, whether that's in our production and our delivery. Along the way, we have to be awesome at a few things. We don't have to be perfect at all of it. We can outsource our accounting and our billing. We can outsource our editing. But if we don't have a way to connect with people, if people are only hiring us because we make an image look a certain way, eventually we're going to stop being hired because every image looks the same way.
No question.
If we only capture one style of person, well, what are we going to do when somebody else starts to do the same thing and does it better?
Right. That's exactly right.
So if we're making photos or we're selling properties, what are we best at? How do we, as if we're opening a restaurant, if we're running a business right now, this is a crazy time to run a business. You have to walk this fine line of, I can't tell, do I scream at somebody who's not wearing a mask when they walk into my business? If you do you want to be, how long before you offend people and they just get a bad taste? You may be in the right. But if, I don't know, we've put so much emphasis on social media. We're all putting our opinions out there. How many people actually do we value their opinions? How many people have lost work because they've just continued to put their opinions out there, and other people are saying, I'm just tired of it. We can have convictions, and I think that it's really important to have very strong convictions. And these are our lines that we don't cross. But where do we
we're putting too much of ourselves out on a regular basis. I think that can give people at that moment in time a skewed opinion of who you are, because how you feel today might be a moment in time in your life that it may not be an accurate representation of how you really feel or believe. It's just a moment of frustration. But if someone judges you on a moment of frustration and doesn't take the time, because we don't have time sometimes to look at that, but they judge you on a moment of frustration, that's not who you are.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be judged at your worst moment. No one would.
No, and there's people who will be judged at the worst moment.
Yes.
And they deserve to be because of how bad the moments are.
No, well, if you cross the pale, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
But why do I need to see people constantly trashing people for not wearing masks, or constantly trashing people for wearing a mask? For wearing a mask,
Right.
I'm sitting outside and I'm wearing a mask because I don't want to offend somebody, not because I'm not terrified. Mm-hmm. I know more and more people who are getting sick, but I'm trying not to live in this world of fear, or else we couldn't do this conversation.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, I want to be really aware of how far I'm not just going to start going to bars without a mask on.
Right.
I want to be careful, because
that's pragmatic thinking. That's just logic.
Yeah, but if I have a friend who's going to the bar, God, you've been home for almost a year by yourself. I can't judge you on it. I don't have to agree with it. I might think that it's a little crazy that things are, Tampa Bay is having a New Year's party, but I don't have to go to it.
Right.
But I shouldn't be up in arms about it.
Yeah.
What I have to do is be careful what I'm doing,
short.
and that my actions don't impact other people detrimentally.
Well, and it goes back to crafting your authenticity when you're talking with a client. I mean, one of the things I've had to pay attention to is how polarized we are as a society.
Sure.
And the sad thing for me, not with this show, but the sad thing with my realtor practice is that I am uber sensitive in every regard about making sure that I do not project any type of lean left or right or anything political if I can help it. That's almost impossible today.
Yeah.
And I do advertisement on a very conservative station in this town, and I do it because it's been successful for me with just clients. That station's been successful. The fact that they have conservative slant, it's not why I'm there. But I am very cognizant of the fact that people are conditioned to judge you on first impressions or a feeling, and they're looking oftentimes to what side of the political fence you lean on. And that's a horrible way to live. But we do this as humans, especially in the year 2021, all the time.
I'm sure you've had it where clients just don't want to go into a house because they have to wear a mask. Well, it's, listen, I get it.
Yeah.
You've got it. You don't buy it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, being kind. I lead with kindness.
Yeah,
right?
And let's just
That's
realize
someone else's fear.
My fear doesn't have to be your fear.
Correct.
And it doesn't make them wrong.
Correct. It isn't about right or wrong. It's about being kind. We can both be right in our own headspaces, right? I mean, we know murder is wrong. So one side's right in that equation, one side's wrong. But when it's something of a different context, which is just basically the inner workings of life, we're going to have differences.
Sure.
And there's no really right or wrong often.
No.
Just lead with kindness, respect the other side, and get on with it.
Yeah, and there is a level of just have empathy for your neighbor.
Absolutely.
We've lost that in this year, and we've lost that, and it's not just the past 4 years, man. We've been losing empathy towards different over the past 16 years.
I keep coming back to humility, though, because you can't have empathy without humility first. I think we just for whatever reason don't find or don't want to find humility in everything we do, from our thinking, our reasoning, our actions. Because if we really led with humility, and you could humble your ego, your persona, if you could come at everything with that, you're going to be more empathetic and more open and more willing to hear the other side. You will be more kind.
Yeah. If we get rid of our self-entitlement.
Absolutely.
I'm entitled to my opinion, but I'm not entitled to force it down your throat.
Of course not.
I'm entitled to, there are a lot of people who think that they're entitled because they're a photographer to make a certain amount of money or to have a successful business. We're not entitled to it. I don't deserve anybody hiring me unless I give something of value to them and unless they like me.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not a gas station.
You don't deserve anything. I mean, I don't think it's a whole philosophical conversation, but do you really deserve anything?
No.
And the point is, you earn, and you it's the old. I'm sure this is biblical. You sow, you reap what you sow, and that's good and bad.
Sure. Yeah, we don't. There's nobody owes us anything to hire us.
Right.
You know, nobody owes a restaurant owner to come into the restaurant, and a restaurant owner doesn't owe anybody else anything. When we live in a service industry, which photography, real estate, restaurants, bars, heck, cleaning services. Most businesses are service industry. We're not commodities.
We're doing for others. We're doing things for others.
Yeah. We're not the gas station in the middle of a one-light town.
Exactly right.
Where, but even there, if you're a jerk, people may drive to the next town over because they don't like you.
Yeah, and
they'll only stop there when it's absolutely convenient and they're desperate.
Okay, so think about even we don't think in terms of big picture anymore. Like lead with kindness and humility.
Yeah.
The fact that person might be a jerk hurts other people. It hurts people around it. It hurts people in their town because that's one less person that would come to that town and stop. For gasoline, and they may be inclined to explore that town or maybe visit another business or experience something. But because that person is not leading with kindness, they are depriving the potential of other people meeting new people and gaining their business.
Yeah, all of our actions impact beyond us.
Absolutely.
We ripple far beyond our own little world.
It's just really, it's a shame though. It's and it's very esoteric conversation, but that's reality, and it's more in our forefront now because we're going through this crisis.
Yeah.
And I look at life in a way that, what is the ultimate solution to whatever I confront? Sometimes the solution's painful.
Sure.
But I don't think it's painful to take a breath and change who we are and how we approach life. See, and maybe it's oversimplistic, and my kids laugh at me, but I tell them, I said, lead with kindness, be humble, and admit your mistakes, and life will be a lot easier for you.
Yeah.
And they don't understand. Well, they're so married sometimes to their opinions. Sure. I think we all are.
And we'll die on them. We'll die on that hill.
It's insanity.
And an idea of our ethical rightness, and
what
our
good
families
are your rights
not
if they're killing you.
Yeah, and I think that I look at my own family. We have very different opinions on things. I'm probably the most middle of the road of all.
Okay.
Only because I can so clearly understand both sides of it. I don't. I'm not from a generation. I'm not a Reagan conservative. I didn't grow up in that era. I came along, and I remember the first time I remember watching cable or watching TV, I should say. Invasion of Iraq in 2000 or no 91. So before that, I remember watching a movie here and there, but the first time I remember TV being on in our house that wasn't me watching a movie rented from the library was early 90s.
Right.
Living in Ligonier with the invasion of Iraq. So that's what I was brought up with as quote unquote conservative values is from the 90s on. My ideas of conservatism are very different than the quote unquote conservative party right now.
Right.
So the past 4 years in our household has been very interesting because I've got traditional conservatives and then I've got more traditional liberals. I don't think I have anybody on either far left or far right.
Right. But there's a gap there.
But and there's a big gap there because you don't have to be on far left or far right to call out BLM protests or to call out the invasion.
Right. Right.
I'm going to use the term invasion because we saw a Confederate flag in the Capitol. That's an invasion.
No doubt.
People don't have to like that opinion.
No doubt.
But
no doubt. I would agree 100%.
you don't carry a symbol of racism and then say you're a law and order party, beat up cops, and have one die. That is what conservatives scream at the left for.
No question.
And then and then at the same time, the argument being, well, the left was able to riot all summer, so we just rioted a little bit.
That's so oversimplification.
But
no, it's so oversimplified.
But it's over something that 99% of the world believes are lies, versus something that I think probably 60% of the world can say there's inequality.
I would hope that number's higher, because there certainly is.
And
logically, I mean, how can you not see that?
Yeah, because we live in our bubbles.
But again, the solution to that problem is not violence either.
No, it's the
horrible.
Solution to that is we have to have empathy for each other. We have to, I can still be a Republican and say, man, there is absolutely no excuse for some of this. Antoine Rose was shot in the back unarmed. He had been somewhere that's not disputable. He had been in a car involved in a shooting. He was shot in the back. One person was shot at the Capitol, and the cops opened up the gates. And yet this summer, there were tanks in the street. We have to look beyond our own opinion,
right,
to be willing to accept that it may not be the way that we want to admit it.
Yeah, but see, we're so, I don't even know the right word. It's not greedy. It's we're so, entitled is a good word. We're just not willing to admit we're wrong. Or that we could be wrong. We're not willing to admit that we don't know everything. Yeah. We're living in a world of absolutes in our minds. We don't know absolutes.
No.
The human experience is not based around absolutes. It's just not. I mean, it's. I had a very one of my guests months ago put it so eloquently that I can't replicate. But it was essentially, Dan, that we're living in a world that is driven by the perception of absolutes, and I think their political fervor comes from that. Sure. And we're grasping onto this stuff, not willing to say that, there's a lot of areas of gray, and this or this could be true too. It just requires a little more thinking, a little more, and humility,
and
a little more thinking, more thinking.
I am guilty of thinking that my way is right.
I think we all do to a degree, though.
I like to think that I think my way is right in a way that isn't hateful to anybody else, that isn't demeaning of anybody else,
but it's still a level of human arrogance we all share.
But it is a level of arrogance. There's no doubt about that. And that need to, as you said, humble ourselves, which is also biblical. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and humble yourselves before your neighbors. There's a necessity to just say, I may not be right.
What's wrong with that? I don't
like to be wrong. I'm not going to say I like to be wrong.
I don't think anybody likes to be wrong, because I think your human flow of life gets knocked off kilter when you have to admit that you're wrong. It upsets like something inside you, and that I believe that's true. But why be married to an idea that you're willing to fall on the sword for, even when you know it's been proven that you're wrong, because you're not humble enough to admit that? I don't get it. It's the most illogical thing. And I think that there are political pundits on every spectrum that are out there, at least what they exude verbally is that they're willing to fall on that sword no matter what. Yeah. That's nuts.
Yeah, and we're willing to push conspiracy theories both directions.
Well, this is another,
which can just go a whole different realm.
No, but in that vein, is that now a thing because we're Are we intellectually lazy? Are we lazy in general? That we just looking for entertainment all the time? Because basically that's an entertainment script. A conspiracy is entertainment for people. It's fodder for the mind, which they can get on TV, radio, podcasting. It's ideas
that we're not connected right now. We're not around people. We don't actually, we're behind keyboards. It's, I notice myself. And I've done it throughout the past year. I've jumped on people on both sides and just been like, come on, man, nobody's coming to take your guns. Or, come on, guys, not everybody who's dying from COVID is dying from COVID. Does it, there's estimates that 80% of the people who have died have
other issues.
Had significant other issues.
Right.
Does it mean that COVID wasn't part of that? No.
Of course. It's absolutely real. You can't deny.
But why was it before that? How many people have died from the flu this year? Not many. We haven't talked about it.
Well, I don't think they're really tracking it.
So does it make the flu less deadly than the flu traditionally is? No. Does it make COVID less deadly because the reality is we don't know. So I've jumped on friends on both sides, and I had to be like, man,
But Dan, the middle's not sexy. See, that's the thing. The middle, modernism's not sexy in this world. It's not going to be sold on TV or radio. It's not going to be.
No, I had to apologize to a friend. I had jumped on her, and she's big with the Republican Party, and I've known her for a long time. And I called her out on something, and then I was like, man, I was just really offensive, and I sent her a message, and I just said, I am sorry. We don't agree on this. I don't understand that. But what I said was inappropriate, and I apologize. And I deleted the comment. That's not
happening today, though.
Because I realized the way that I see things in a simplicity of black and white, for a lot of folks, it's not about, is it Creepy Joe or Creepy creepy Trump. I don't understand how we can defend the actions of either one of them in circumstances, because there's not a whole lot of difference. There's not a whole lot of difference in any of the politicians that we've had.
No.
Unless you have a different political bent. If you're so party oriented that you can't see that they're very similar. Republicans don't have a fiscal conservative among them right now.
Nope. It's all catchphrases and things, and that's the funny part about it. They're married to slogans, but the slogans don't represent who they actually are.
No, and was America that awful of a place? Did the economy need to grow? Absolutely. But to make America great again,
we already were great. In my opinion, that could be egocentric.
We have lost that ability, but one president's not going to change that until we start to actually compete on a world level again. Until we start to have technologies that are coming out of here that are changing the world. Until we start to have medical breakthroughs. Until we start to have educational systems that aren't.
We have things like that, though.
We do, but we might be
losing we might be slipping on our. We might not be number one in everything anymore. But
we're not anywhere near the top 50 in education worldwide.
People are still begging to come into this country.
They are.
Even right now, as fucked up as we are right now, they are begging to come into this country.
Because it's still, under most circumstances, a better place with opportunity than most. It may not always be a safer place, but it is a better place where if you may not like it, but you still have the opportunity to create something. There's nobody, if you can get in here,
everything's here,
there's nobody here saying you don't have an opportunity.
Exactly. Everything's here, Dan. The education, the money, the opportunity. It's all here.
We may not be, we're not anywhere near the top in education anymore.
But it's here.
We're failing in that.
But it's here. And oftentimes you can get it.
Yeah. I think to an extent, I think that when you look at, again, it depends on how you're doing things. You're using test scores or you're using real life entrepreneurship. We as a nation are compared to places like Sweden and Denmark where they have 20 million people. They have a smaller population than California in their country. We have a large population with massive demographic differences. Are there those who aren't coming out that are brilliant? It's not just the elite few who are getting a good education.
Right.
If you're smart,
Right.
and you actually work hard,
Right.
and it's instilled in you. I think there's, as parents, we have to instill in our children, and this never mattered to me until I had a daughter. I have to instill in my daughter that, well, Daddy, I can't do that. I'm a girl. Well, no, Hadley, you can do that.
Anything.
You can do anything that you want. Oh, I can't. Well, you don't have to give up, and you don't have to succeed, but let's try your best.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be scared of that hill, because if you fall going down the hill on skis, we're going to get you back up. I'm right here with you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have, just give me your best. I was an awful student. I'm mediocre in a lot of places in my life. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be, but there's a reality that I'm mediocre in. But the only one who's going to change that is me. Government's job is not to give me money. Government's job is not to ensure that I have a great job.
Right.
I think that right now there's an importance in that because a lot of people lost their jobs not through any fault of their own.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you could argue that people lost their jobs directly because of government, state, local, federal.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's a need. You can't just say, oh, we're not helping you. You can't just say, you can't get evicted either. Because if you're only helping the people who are unemployed, and then you're looking at the person who has 5 apartment complexes as that rich billionaire, even though they might be leveraged to the wazoo, and they're going to default on their loans, everything has a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
But we have to be willing to say, I have to be responsible for making myself better.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a photographer and I'm not out there shooting pictures that I want to shoot, then I have no excuse that I'm not getting work except for me.
That's exactly right.
If you're a real estate agent and you're not out there advertising and talking and networking and asking your clients for new referrals, there's nobody to blame for your lack
100%.
of success except you. And if
100%.
you're a restaurant owner who can't figure out how to adapt to this conversation, there might actually be somebody who's responsible for part of that. That's not just you. But it's not
a unique spot, yeah.
But it's not the government's job to just say, we're going to bail you out completely. Mm-hmm. We're going to work with you to make sure that you're able to still succeed.
But again, Dan, it's that pragmatism. Like you say the word pragmatism, you know, a lot of people don't understand what the word means. A lot that do are okay with it, and a lot of people that are very religious oriented think that's not the way to go. I just come with the word pragmatism because that is, it's a way to take major problems and really flesh them out. But we don't want to do that. We want to have an instant solution. That's what I believe, and I'm moving on to the next thing. Yeah. And that's just, we learned how to fix this problem when we were kids, critical thinking happened when we were in grade school, really. Yeah. We learned how to do it there. But we've regressed, man.
Sure.
And maybe the media's made us lazy. Maybe the constant barrage of information. We're having Google at our fingertips. I don't know. Yeah.
When was the last time you got somewhere you didn't know how to go without a GPS?
Exactly right, man.
I mean,
I thought about
I made
that
it to
the other
Bonnaroo
day.
at 18 years old in a beat-up Volkswagen GTI that, we had a literal boombox in the back for music.
I get it.
I made it to Bonnaroo.
It's crazy.
Without a GPS.
It's crazy.
Manchester, Tennessee, having never been there, we had printouts and a map. And we got there.
Mm-hmm. We used to leave the house without a cell phone, man. I used to leave the house in my parents' car. They didn't know where I was going.
I had to use a GPS to remember how to get to Coriopolis last time I was here.
We just made life easy. I'm okay with enjoying the conveniences of life. We would hope that our life would be a little easier.
Sure.
I would hope so. But it has the negative aspects of this technology in 2021 is that we just don't think for ourselves. Sure. And because of that, we've closed in a lot, and I just don't think that we're leading with kindness, and we're not willing to be humble first and admit our mistakes. And these sound like simple stuff that your teacher and your parents and your Catholic school catechism people might have told you if you're Catholic, your Sunday school folks. You were taught this by elders. Yeah. Generally, I'm guessing most of your early life. Sure. We're not doing it as adults.
Let's just dial it down to really simplistic. You have a Garmin watch on.
Yeah. I brought this today for you, by the way, too. I want you to fix it for me.
Garmin Phoenix?
I don't know what model it is. Right. I'll take it off and you can show it to you.
So you got a Garmin on. I got a Suunto.
I can't invert it, by the way, like you told me.
So we've got the top technology of watches. I mean, oh, you got a Suunto on. Awesome. All right. With Suunto Core. Cool.
Okay.
So the newer watches have heart rate monitors.
Okay.
I did 10 miles yesterday, and it told me that it was going to be 107 hours to recover. Well, when we follow the metrics to the level that we follow the metrics,
Right.
we lose the ability to know our bodies. So I have a hard time running fast. I can run at an 8:30 pace pretty comfortably.
Okay.
To get to a 6:30 pace is uncomfortable.
Okay.
It shouldn't be. I've been running for a long enough period of time that I should be able to do a couple of miles in that 6:30 pace.
All right.
But when I follow the metrics on my watch and I watch my heart rate and I'm going, oh, wait, I'm getting up to there pretty high, then there's something mental that says, I can't push it as hard.
Got it.
Or I'm working really hard. So I've got a buddy, Darren, we've talked about briefly. Darren Miller, I think he's running with a smartwatch now, but Darren Miller followed the David Goggins idea of
he's insane.
Run with a dumb watch, like a Timex Ironman. No data. All you know is
How you feel.
and the time elapsed, or what time it is for that matter, and maybe a direction. So he did that because he didn't want to know the metrics that said his body was getting tired. He didn't want to know that his heart rate was up higher, that his VO2 was getting to max,
Right.
his blood oxygen level was getting depleted, because it only gives you more things to give yourself an excuse to stop.
Very interesting.
So I like technology.
Yeah.
I love camera technology. You know, I'm driving a buddy gave me an Audi, and I'm driving a 2007 Audi right now,
Right.
which is, compared to my Prius, so nice. And this is an old car. And then, you know, I was looking at the new Land Rover Defenders, and the entire thing is touchscreen.
Yep.
It may be easier, and it may give us everything that we need, but there can be an there can take away the ability to just be able to make those managed decisions on our own.
And there's something intrinsically beautiful about that, isn't it? Like,
Knowing from experience what we can get away with and what we can't.
Yeah.
I know that I can.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me that if I go into a climbing gym and I'm climbing and they take all the numbers off of the climbing gym,
Right.
and we don't have a rating system anymore,
Right.
I'm going to know that there's things I'm going to fail on. But if I'm looking at it and it says that it's a V3 and I'm only comfortable climbing a V2, I'm not going to try the V3 and expect to succeed, or a V4 and expect to succeed. If I start to climb and I don't know what it is because I'm climbing, I'm just working my way up a problem, I begin to feel and learn and adapt to the climb. When I was younger climbing outdoors, I wasn't a good climber.
Right.
But I also didn't have on my phone a watch or, you know, a list of, oh, this is the route, it's this rating. So we would just climb to get up to the top.
Right.
And it was somebody else who had experience that would say, hey, no, that's off course. You have to stay over here.
Got it.
Well, maybe I couldn't get that problem. And so I'd go around it and then I'd keep on climbing.
Yeah.
But you begin to learn from experience, what can I hold? And it doesn't give us a metric that says, oh, I can't do that.
See, that's important for kids. Like when you're a child, you learn through mistakes.
Yeah.
These things are actually prohibiting you maybe from even making any mistakes at times because it's keeping you on a path, right?
It's like teaching my daughter to ski. I don't want her to go fall off the Black Diamond and get hurt.
Right.
But I also don't want her to see anything other than green and think she can't do it.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly right.
the way to do that is to just say, oh, no, we're going to go over here and then we're going to cut down here.
Got it.
And she doesn't know what we're on. She's 4.
Right.
Daddy, I can't do that. Hadley, that's okay. I'm going to be in front of you.
Yeah.
If you fall, I promise, if you get out of control, I'm right here. But just listen to my voice and watch me, and we're going to work on this. Just give me your best shot.
Understood.
Well, if I feel like the metrics tell me I can't do it, then I don't try it. Or I quit before I get there. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that's what GPSs do. I think that's what smartwatches do. They dial us down to the point where we rely on the metrics more than we rely on our own confidence. And we're not willing to push it past it because, I don't know if I can do that. So I've been running with heart rate monitor. The heart rate's nice because it gives me all that data, and I know, it's able to more accurately tell me how many calories I'm burning,
Sure.
how hard I'm working based off of the heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed on, we did 12 and a half miles on Saturday. The first couple of miles were really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been running long. I hadn't been doing a whole lot of runs lately at all. But by mile 6, I was like, I'm kind of good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm feeling okay.
Yeah.
I know that I'm 6 miles in. I'm feeling better than I was at mile 2.
Right.
And then the last couple of miles were feeling great. Had I been watching my heart rate, I guarantee there are places where I would have been like, oh man, my breathing's hard. I would have slowed down.
Of course.
But because I don't have that information,
Of course.
I'm just keeping up with the group.
And that's how it was prior to technology. I get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so-
not always been the best.
No, we went out and we ran with our friends, and we just ran as hard as we could.
Right.
We went out and we went skateboarding. We just tried the tricks that we could. We didn't know how big it was. When we were skiing, you're learning to ski, and
100%.
when you're young, you're not paying attention to until you realize that you've done it. You're not worried about what rate. Am I on a black diamond? It's I followed my friend.
Right. Exactly correct.
Exactly
correct.
Unless it was Goosebumps at Seven Springs, and you're like, I'm not going on that 'cause that's icy. But when you follow a friend and you're not paying attention to what you're on, and you're just following and making your way down, and you're
Right.
making the decisions that you need to make to be safe on the way down,
Right.
you're
right,
adapting
right.
to the environment. I feel like we are less adaptable to our environments than we've ever been before.
I think
It's
you're
why you
right.
have people doing ultra marathons. It's
Yeah.
why people are studying the Wim Hof method of ice baths and breathing.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten to the point where we rely on technology more than ourselves, and our bodies aren't as adaptable,
Well,
and our minds aren't as adaptable, and we don't
That's it.
adapt to the technology changes. In photography, the bane of old school photographers' existences that had studios in the 90s and 2000s was digital.
for sure.
And then it was
Of course.
the wedding photographers. Well, there's so many of them. Well, if you're a good photographer,
Right.
then you don't have anything to worry about. If you connect with people and you're
Yeah.
honest, you don't have anything to worry about. I want more and more people to shoot pictures.
Yeah.
We have a ton of photographers in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of them I don't know.
Yeah.
There are consistently a few who are rising to the top because of how they do it. And they've been there for a while.
Got it.
If they don't continue to adapt, and if they don't continue to resonate with their clients, they're not going to be there.
Exactly right.
But somebody else coming in, or somebody who's been there 10 years longer than them, if you feel bitter towards them, it's nobody's fault except your own.
Right.
Because you didn't adapt. You got comfortable, and all of a sudden the cameras changed or the technology changed, and we got angry about it.
Man.
Or, oh wait, how did they get there? What's this Instagram? Well, they're on Instagram. Well, I don't understand Instagram. Well, neither do I. But then you've got the Don McMillans, who old war photographers who were able to adapt to that technology because they truly saw it as an opportunity to share their craft.
Right.
I don't think Chase Jarvis makes pictures anymore. He runs Creative Live. Creative Live came out of his willingness to share his craft,
Right.
to show behind the scenes and how he did. He didn't hide it. I can go and I can learn from almost any photographer out there today. A lot of them are making money off of that. Good. They should be. They're sharing something of value. But there's not an excuse to not be able to adapt anymore.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting. That's a philosophical decision about entrepreneurs in general. What you keep closely guarded and what you share.
Yeah.
And in this world, I took the standpoint that I wasn't doing rocket science, whether it was guitars or whatever. And if I can be of help to someone trying to do it,
Sure.
if I did it, they certainly can do it. Why would I want to hold back what I've learned?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I pass that forward? I'm not saying it's always accurate to do
Speaking
that.
of, do you have any majors in here?
No, we never. We made the prototype. We just never went through with it.
All
I
right.
wanted to.
I
wanted to.
And that would have been, that was, but you also understood, like, you didn't die on that rock. You didn't need to.
Yes.
There,
which was I had my own guitar company called Major that I wanted to do. We made a couple prototypes. We never got it off the ground. That's what Dan's referring to.
So did you keep any of them?
The prototype is out with Fran Stuber,
Okay.
and there's a
and
gentleman.
Fran is
Paul
Paul's
Stanley's tech.
guitar
Yeah,
tech.
he still is.
Okay.
Fran has it. There is a gentleman who has put hardware on it. There are supposed to be pickups, and they were going to do something with it. It hasn't. I don't want to reveal it yet. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it's. And I'm only playing that close to the vest because I don't know what their intentions are with it. For me, whether it happens or not, it's not going to change my life.
Yeah.
But that's an example of where it was nothing. It was my design, but I would share my experiences with anybody, anytime, answer any questions about my journey, because if I can't share what I did, then what did I do it for? Like, what value does any of this have if we can't share human experiences?
Sure.
That's my philosophy. It might not always be the best monetary philosophy to enrich myself, but this is kind of how I've lived my life. I'm comfortable this way.
And if it hadn't been for other people when you started Boogie Street,
Right.
being willing to take a chance on you and say, I mean, Washburn letting you design stuff,
Oh,
Paul being able to
100
talk to Paul about,
Yep.
You got to talk to Paul Stanley about guitar designs. Mm-hmm. You got to talk to Fran, his guitar tech. You got to talk to Freddie Koala, who
Friendships
was on,
now.
and,
Friendships.
and those
Relationships, man.
I mean, that's wild. That
And I feel very fortunate. Very
if it
fortunate.
hadn't been for their willingness,
Take a chance on me.
then
know?
you wouldn't have ever had that opportunity. And so if you're not willing to then go and do that for somebody else,
It's reciprocal.
now
It has to be.
you've basically said, well, they gave it to me and I'm not going to give it to you.
Exactly right.
That's the worst place
And
to
I
be.
think you just articulated what I've been feeling, because I used to use the phrase that people would say, I want to sell guitars on the internet too. I said, man, do it. And I'll tell you what worked and what didn't work, and they would be shocked that I'd share that. And I said, look, a trained monkey could do what I did.
Yeah.
It wasn't rocket science, man. I just got up every day and did it. That's it.
Now, you did some unique things, though. You had the boogie board, which was not technologically amazing, but you had people engaged with you as a brand.
You have to.
And what you did as one of the first people I ever saw do that was you branded yourself within a business.
Yes.
The business Boogie Street Guitars without Eric McKenna wasn't Boogie Street Guitars.
Yeah.
It was just a guitar center.
Yeah. Pretty much.
It wasn't even a guitar center because it was really just Washburn and Parker. So it was a very limited, but it was Eric McKenna who made that unique. It was Eric McKenna who said, hey guys, you had people on the board say, hey, what about these pickups? And you're like, I don't know, we'll try it. Like, I'll get a prototype in.
You got good memory.
I mean, just wild things like that where the consumer was now speaking directly to you. The chances of Washburn saying, we're going to do that were slim.
Right. It changed the dynamic.
But
of
you
things.
were able to say, we can prove this on a 200 guitar scale.
Right.
And then they followed through with some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done, we changed in our own small little way. We changed the way the guitar business moved. We disrupted things. We found price points and ideas and creativity and limited runs, and so we made it palatable for someone at the $1,000 price point to have something really unique and custom.
Sure.
And that had never been done before.
And it wasn't stopping there. I mean, you had stuff up to the $3,000 and $4,000 price mark.
No doubt, but more than that.
And then for the guy who couldn't afford the $1,000, you had the $300, $400 imports,
Absolutely.
where they can get 90% of the tech at the discount, but it was something that they could play.
Which was such a novel idea. We thought that just in life in general, people want custom stuff. Americans want custom stuff.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that no one wants run-of-the-mill stuff if they can afford it.
Sure.
And I think the other part of it was people want to feel special in the interaction. They want to feel like they're part of something, and that goes back to our conversation why people will join parties and yay team. But I was proud of the Boogie Street crew and the Boogie Street Troopers because I felt like these were my people.
Yeah.
Like they're buying into this vision I have. You know what I mean?
But what you were even doing beyond that was Freddie doing Q&As.
Yeah.
Where you had your guitar tech who was on tour with Black Sabbath,
all these bands, yeah.
Megadeth, right?
Yeah, Megadeth, Ozzy,
major bands, the guitar tech, coming in and answering questions for the guy in the street.
Because it was special, because again, I'm a fan. I am a rock and roll nut. I'm not a great musician. I'm not a great guitarist. I'm just a fan. And I said, wow, wouldn't it have been cool before I was in the business, wouldn't it have been cool to be able to do this? So I looked at what my clients would really dig because I am with them.
Yeah.
You see, I'm not looking at it upward, downward, sideways. I'm there with them.
Yeah.
If that's cool to me, it's probably going to be cool to them.
Yeah, but nobody else was doing that at that time.
Because no one gives a shit because it was all about money. Yeah. See, in the beginning, we had to make money too. I had kids and all that stuff. But I did a lot of stuff in the guitar business with no idea if I'd make any money. But I wanted to do it because it was cool as shit. Yeah. You see what I mean? Like that.
And it worked. Passion, and because it was authentic.
I got a little lucky there. But I think a lot of stuff worked in because I willed it to happen because I was so passionate about it.
Sure. And then there were issues where, all of a sudden there were forces against you at the same time. eBay.
There'll always be forces.
eBay saying not putting your listings up as high because they want you to pay more money. Or they want a bigger fee.
There's always stuff like that.
But early on.
Isn't that life?
You had eBay publishing stories about you as well as they were trying to grow their platform to the major retailers.
Yeah.
So that willingness to share the experience and that willingness for others to share into what you're doing and to speak into it and promote that.
Right.
It's a mandate to go forward and do the same.
I feel there is.
If you just get the information and then won't talk to people or just a jerk to them, then guaranteed Paul and Fran wouldn't have stuck with you.
Exactly right. Exactly right. There was a part of me in the beginning that knew we were doing something really special because the internet was new and there wasn't any online dealers. I knew that it was unique because there wasn't any mentors. I tried to find folks that had and I did find folks that had great guitar stores.
Yeah.
And they could tell me certain things to keep me in business. But when it came to how we operated, so everything we did online, we created that. We figured it out. Sure. We didn't know what we were doing. We just figured a great way to communicate. Yeah. Let's exploit it to reach more people.
Yeah.
Never knowing that a Facebook was on the horizon, that Twitter was on the horizon, Instagram was even further on the horizon. Didn't see any of that coming. We just knew that on that boogie board, I would go home and say, "Isn't it amazing? I can almost instantly, if they're online, instantly connect with people and show pictures of my guitars, and I can market this way, reach more people, and really enjoy the interaction." Yeah. How badass is this? And then poof. Facebook. Yeah. It was amazing like that. What I was experiencing, Facebook took all the goodness of that and put it right out there.
Well, and you had a forum just for your product. It wasn't like it's the Audi forums where it's got sponsorships. This was a forum just for fans of the guitars, fans of Washburn, particularly the Boogie Street
Unique
Washburn.
And specific.
And that's awesome. Had you just been, I'm not going to share it.
Right. 1,000%.
You would have been shut down. Paul would have left.
No doubt, yeah. I think artists want to see. Again, and motivation comes from all different ways. But artists want to be represented right, taken care of, and feel like they're part of something that's successful. The money's very important, but they want to feel like their venture is successful. Yeah. I think with us, he knew we were doing stuff in touching people. Yeah. With our product that big box retailers hadn't figured out yet how to do that.
Well, you had some good mentorship along the way too. Was it Jim?
Jim Stewart.
Yep.
Still talk to him every day.
You had.
He's been around. He's in that picture. He's one of the picture over there. Yeah.
And so you had this new platform, but old school classic mentorship.
Yeah, I use both of it. You have to. It comes back to just. It's like I talked about earlier, Dan, when we just don't do critical thinking. I had to think things through because that was the only path to success. Sure. I think life is so easy now for most of us compared to the way it was before social media, or at least we thought it was, that everything's spoon-fed right to us constantly all day long, and I think that we just assume we can make a snap decision about something and I'll figure it out and it's going to work. The audacity to believe that we know things that we don't know, or the audacity that we can figure things out in a soundbite, and we really believe that now, which is like 15 years ago, you would hear a soundbite and you'd want more. You'd want to really, wait, what did they say? Let me dive into that.
No, now you just push that and go.
That, I think, is the crux of how we're failing in communication, just for ourselves. Even during the one-way communication, what we ingest, we're failing ourselves because we're lying to ourselves that we know things and believe things that we believe to be true, and they're not often, you know? That's the thing. There's no curiosity. Where is the curiosity?
Yeah.
Where is the curiosity? I asked that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a curiosity, but it's...
Is there?
Yeah, but it's not a curiosity in the truth. It's a curiosity in furthering our own beliefs. So
an echo chamber, then.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we are definitely curious about things that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But then we write them off.
Okay.
At least I think so. I mean,
I think you're right.
I think there's a lot of people who you could go and look at. You could put 5 articles from 5 different sources in front of people.
Right.
And they'll look at them.
Right.
But if it doesn't already match up with what they believe and what they think the world is, they're not going to believe it no matter what.
Right.
You know, if Jesus comes back to earth, when he comes back to earth, people aren't going to believe it.
Right.
Because it's not going to be their perception of what it should be.
Right.
You know, you'll watch miracles happen, man. People will just not buy it. You know, they'll be curious.
Yeah.
They'll want to see it.
Yeah.
But it won't change their mind. And I think that's the world we live in today. I think so. I'm curious about that. It's kind of the monkey in the cage. Like, I'm curious about that. I want to see it. It's voyeuristic.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to actually believe it.
Where's the fascination in things? Like I think we've lost some of that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not making a value judgment there because it isn't one generation versus other. I just think the curiosity is different today because we, at one point prior to 97, 98, we didn't have everything at our fingertips.
Yeah.
So learning required effort. Real effort, whether the learning is formal, whether it's informal, the curiosity, to play through your curiosity all the way through took effort.
Yeah, you had to go somewhere or take classes or go to the library, not just pull it up on the phone.
And we should be more curious now because it still should take a little bit of effort. All the tools are at our fingertips, but it still takes that thinking to take it to the next step. Okay, so Elon Musk makes this car and it's expensive and it's electric. It doesn't use fuel. But it's too expensive for me, and screw electric cars because they're too expensive. That's where the thinking stops for a lot of people.
Or Elon Musk makes an electric car, no more fossil fuels. This is the greatest thing ever.
Exactly.
Except where's the electricity come from?
Well, right.
We don't want to go into a critical thinking that challenges our worldview.
What about learning
to accept and understand
as much as you can about something? How do I say that? We don't flesh anything out. It's like we pick a side and then we demonize or we love. But what about, there's nothing wrong with being lukewarm on something because you need more information. And what's wrong with that?
With most things, we probably should be lukewarm.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, it's crazy
Are
to me.
electric cars awful? No. Are they way better for the environment than a normal car? No.
Yeah, well,
the process that goes in to the mining of the materials
for
and the
batteries, absolutely.
Is solar 10 times cleaner than
takes, Dan,
traditional
that takes
fuel.
effort to get there mentally. It takes effort that we don't want to spend anymore.
Yeah, and let's, no, because again, you've got, is it better for emissions? Maybe. But we have to look at things beyond one perspective.
Of course.
We have mining to go into precious metals. We have smelting to make the glass. Oh, and then we don't have a way to recycle it. We use glass bottles that are supposed to be recyclable in the U.S., and we can't recycle a damn bottle. And yet we're drinking more wine and beer than ever before as a nation.
Yep.
And it all comes in glass.
Yep.
Breweries are going back to glass right now because they can't get cans. But we can't recycle glass.
But that
I can't buy the beer that I want because I have this. I will not buy beer in bottles at this point. Because I realize that we're not recycling to the level we should be.
right.
And that recycling costs
ever?
money and takes energy. But why is it that I can go to Africa and get a Guinness in a bottle that's been recycled 3 and 4 times, and I can't recycle a Guinness bottle here?
Right. Right.
You know,
Right.
is it because we have such broad distribution to where there's actually no centralization? Probably. But charge me a deposit on it. I will pay for the deposit
Okay.
so that I know that there's something good coming back
But
out of it.
all of
Because-
what you just extrapolated, that comes from someone that's curious and wants to really understand the issue.
Sure.
Really, and is open-minded enough to say, maybe both sides are screwed. Let's find out what the reality is.
But if I'm going to say I'm not going to do that, and then I'm buying everything from Amazon and wasting all of that, or if I'm spending all this money on exotic fruits and vegetables coming from California because I want to eat fresh right now, but then I'm wasting half of it because I'm not using it, the carbon footprint of that is far higher.
But that requires thinking, Dan. We just don't want to do it.
But it also requires admitting that we're not being true to the ethics that we claim.
Yeah,
we are.
otherwise admitting we're making a mistake
Yeah.
to ourselves.
Sure. So let's buy less. Let's consume less. Let's be intentional
Right.
and not just say, oh, I can get it from Whole Foods today.
Yeah.
There is no reason in the world that some of the stuff that we're eating is coming in. It's not.
I get it.
It's the what's the one brand that's out there now? And I'm gonna trash it for a minute. It's the ugly food box.
I saw that. That's I saw it at Whole Foods. The vegetables are all weird looking, contorted,
and so
ugly fruit or what? Ugly.
The misshaped or whatever.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
that's marketing.
So my mom got one,
Okay.
and it is. But she was like, "But why am I getting bananas?" Well, if you just got fresh from local, it would only be. You're in Pennsylvania. It'd only be root vegetables right now. Well, I thought that's what I was getting. That's what you marketed it as: is buy the discarded that isn't pretty enough,
Right.
and it's local, and you're helping farmers, and you're
Right.
sustaining your local environment.
Right.
Well, now I'm getting lettuce and carrots from California.
Right.
Well, that's just not what it is.
Yeah. It's marketing.
So I love fresh fruit and vegetables, don't get me wrong, but I also recognize the impact of that is pretty massive.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, to grow lettuce in Pennsylvania right now, you got to have a cold box.
Yep.
And we're probably not eating lettuce, we're probably eating kale
Probably.
and chard.
Probably.
But or I'm growing it in my house. So I've got to be consistent across the board. I can make small incremental changes, but if I'm going to really get out there and start preaching it, then I have to start being consistent.
Well, it gets back to feel good. You know, a lot of people in society want to feel good about what they say or what they do and feel good that they're doing something.
Sure.
But again, it takes that extra couple steps of thinking, am I really doing what I say I'm doing?
Yeah.
Or
it's the
so
hashtag
I can get that
culture.
feeling.
You know,
Yeah.
do you remember Coney 2012?
What was
Joseph
it?
Coney. Joseph Coney was a LRA general, Lord's Resistance Army out of Uganda.
Okay.
And he ran the LRA.
Yeah, okay.
And so there was this Coney 2012 campaign to bring him to justice. Well, people who have no care in the world about what's happening to child soldiers in Uganda
Right.
were posting Coney 2012. Most of it, you know, so we're going to post about that, but then we've got modern wars
Right.
in Nigeria and Cameroon
Right.
on the border between them over who's controlling which.
Yeah.
And then you've got in Cameroon the Anglophones fighting for rights against the Francophones. And then in the U.S., we have immigrants who are trying to get here legally
Right.
being demonized along the way.
Yeah.
So we all jump on whichever bandwagon we feel makes us feel good,
Of course.
without actually understanding that nobody had seen Joseph Coney in years. There had been rumored sightings, but nobody had seen the guy in years. He may have been dead. And even friends of mine who worked in Uganda,
Right.
we're like, this is an important message to get out there because we need to know.
Right.
For the sake of kids, we need to know.
Okay.
But even they were admitting, like, we don't actually know if the guy's alive. We think he might be.
Did he ever surface?
I don't think he did. I think there's rumors that he was killed, but nobody really knows. And so, you know, and
oh man.
And these are folks. This is one girl who I went to Uganda with, who was then working at the time with a Rwandan refugee group that she had met. And then after our trip, she was heading north into Gulu to work with, at the time the movie Invisible Children had come out. And it was about these kids who were they would come into Gulu at night to huddle together in hopes that Kony's army wouldn't attack and take them off. And the reality is they were being kidnapped.
Okay.
Heavily.
Okay.
And then some would escape.
Yeah.
And then they had to be reintroduced because they may have witnessed horrific acts.
Right.
And it wasn't a bad thing, but it was a good thing to have getting out there. But only if the understanding is we don't know. We're trying to find out if he's
what's the truth behind it. Yeah. That's social media for you.
Yeah. So it's it's hashtag blackout. I think it was Blackout Tuesday. Well, all of a sudden, using the hashtag took all the effort to allow individuals who are actually trying to teach about Black Lives Matter, who are trying to share important accounts. When you use that hashtag and put a black frame on your Instagram, well, all you saw was a bunch of black frames instead of the information that people were really hoping to get out there.
I think there was a lot of hopelessness. Like I've had this conversation with so many, but I'll repeat myself because I think it's worth stating, and I want to state it. Like there was hopelessness for a lot of white people that really are horrified by what's going on because we just don't know what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate. You know, we want to make sure that I'm empathetic and sympathetic and disgusted.
Yeah.
You know, I'm empathetic and sympathetic for all of my African American friends, but also discuss what's happening. But at the same time, you don't know what to say or do. Am I going to be looked like I'm just? It was really touchy. Like if I say something, people are going to say I'm just saying that because that's the in thing to do.
Yeah.
What a horrible way to think,
Sure.
you know. But you're forced to look at it that way because that's the social media world we're living in. You know.
Yeah. So how can we then, rather than just respond with a hashtag,
real
how can we have that
conversations?
conversation?
Well, I've had some really honest conversations, and they, a couple of them brought me to tears because it really, it required me to look inward.
Sure.
And how lazy have I been in just my day-to-day world not to recognize actions that I might have been doing that are not right, and being permissive, mentally permissive of things around me that are going on that are wrong. You know?
Yeah. I mean, one of the guys that I run with is African American, and we were talking this summer, and he and another buddy had gone to Tennessee for a run, and we're pretty open when we run. We give each other a hard time, but so they came back, and he was like, "Hey, we were having a conversation about him getting followed through grocery stores, and the guy's successful. He runs his own business. He's doing very well for himself. He's got a medical supply company that is killing it."
And he's
he's
matter,
33
though.
years old, and this dude's just crushing it.
Yeah.
And they walked into the grocery store, and he got followed by the security guard all the way through the grocery store. And our other buddy who was with him, who is white from Ohio, and has never witnessed anything like that, just had no idea.
Right.
And so we're talking. He's like, "Come on, Jordan, that doesn't actually happen." And he's like, "Dude, did you see the security guard when we walked in the grocery store?" He was like, "Yeah, he was at the door." He was like, "Well, where was he afterwards?" He was like, "I don't know." He was like, "That's because he followed me the entire way through the store."
Yep. Things that you and I can't
even begin
understand.
to comprehend that.
Nope.
And then, and this is a guy who actually tends to swing conservative. So he's looking at the Black Lives Matter movement and saying, there's issues with this. It's a bunch of white folks going to a rally to make themselves feel good, but there's actually we need to start to say, as a society, people are people. Just because I have a different skin color doesn't mean that I'm doing anything nefarious.
Right.
Well,
100%.
And this isn't a guy who, it shouldn't matter if it is, but it's not a guy who dresses a certain way or talks a certain way or drives a certain way. I mean, it's a guy who's an athlete and a business owner.
Yeah.
And a cool dude.
I don't think it's ever going to change.
And yet I couldn't even imagine that I would walk into my grocery store and somebody would follow me because of how I was dressed.
Yeah.
They should have, because I was the kid getting into trouble.
Right.
I was the kid who was wearing baggy clothes and smoking and stealing and doing drugs, but I would have never gotten followed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's no doubt about
there's
it.
There's a privilege in that, and if we can't recognize that privilege, if we can't recognize that my circumstances dictate the way that I view my life,
Your reality is different than my reality.
Is.
Everybody's reality is different.
Yeah, and again, that comes down to humility and being able to say, well, how should we react in that circumstance? How can we, as your friend, react? Do you want us to intervene? Do you not? What is important for me? Because to be honest, my worldview is pretty small. I don't have a ton of minority friends. I don't live in the city.
Right.
I'm not around a lot of it. The friends that I do have are friends, not because of how they look, just because they're friends, because they're other creatives or we share interests. But the tendency is we live where we live. And if people that we live around, if we don't work in a certain place or live in a certain place,
demographics.
We're surrounded by people who look like us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily intentional. It's because it's got what we want. I think it's better for communities to be diverse. I
Without
think
a doubt.
that the diversity of community brings in a diversity of food. It brings in a diversity of worldview. It teaches my daughter that somebody who you can be best friends with somebody who doesn't look like you.
1,000,000%. And that's why some of the areas in this country, without getting too specific, some areas of the country are known to have tinges of racism still in their culture, in their parochial cultures, because there wasn't efforts to really to have diversity. And we see it today, and that's why the southern states tend to have more issues even with their flags and things, and they're holding on to Confederacy and holding on to a way that it was, and it may even be just built into their system.
Sure.
It's baked in that it isn't outwardly everyday or thinking about that, but that's systematic racism. Well, that's part of it.
Remember, the Confederate flag didn't gain mainstream attention until General Lee and what was the name of that show?
Dukes of
Hazzard. Dukes of Hazzard, that whole movement, Confederate flags at NASCAR, that all started during integration.
Dude, I had to, my story in regards to the Confederate flag. I followed a rock star, Dimebag Darrell, who's one of the gentlemen who we did guitars for. He had a Confederate guitar. It was very popular. We made them for a while. And we made them because we kept getting orders for them, and we made them for, we made them up until about 2011. I never got blowback. It was funny because I had sold a couple of them to African-American metal guitar players. So but I knew. In my head, I knew because my parents were really uncomfortable with it, and I had conversations with them, and I think I had a conversation with my father once. I said, Dad, I don't view that as a racist symbol. And he said, it absolutely, in my opinion, is a racist symbol. And I'm not going to change my mind. And your mother feels the same way. So I got taken to task. I ignored it because there was the money component.
Sure.
It was a profitable piece. And I wasn't getting blowback. And it wasn't until we had discontinued in 2011 because they just fell out of favor. Those guitars just weren't, no one was ordering them. I never associated the guitar with a platform. It wasn't until 2014 and 15 that I saw when it became a big national thing. And I had to walk back my entire, my circumstance and really reflect on it. And I felt horrible, really bad. And I've come out publicly multiple times against it, and I will continue to do so. It's just, to me, it's absolutely a symbol of whether you view it as outward racism or subtle racism, whatever it is, it's not healthy, and it really bothers, for whatever reason, it's their own reason why they feel that way. And we don't have a right to tell them how to feel. And if an African-American friend of mine or the African-American community black America or black world population views that symbol as hatred, then you know what? It's a hatred symbol.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
What I feel or don't feel is irrelevant at that point.
Sure.
And it's a symbol. Our life can go on just as well without it.
Yeah.
And why be married to something that causes division? It's ridiculous. Another example of holding on to something when we know inside it's wrong. Sure. It hurts people.
Yeah. Well, and it was
Be
a great marketing
humble enough
ploy.
and walk away.
And it was brilliant marketing along the way. I mean, think about it.
It's crazy.
The Dukes of Hazzard coming
crazy.
out when it came out. You got integration going on.
Crazy.
There wasn't a Confederate flag. From my understanding, there were very few Confederate flags flying in the South until the 60s. From what I've done research.
Well, there was a couple state flags that
state
had
flags, but
yeah.
it wasn't a NASCAR symbol. It wasn't a normal symbol. It was the mainstreaming of Dukes of Hazzard, of NASCAR getting on TV.
I remember.
That's way before my time. But when you start to look at the timing of it, and when it was really coming out, when it started flying at even more state capitals.
Yeah.
I think it was the flag of Mississippi.
Yeah.
But then it started flying everywhere. All of a sudden, most of the statues of Confederate leaders weren't put up until the 60s.
Yeah.
There were very few of them.
Yeah.
You can't deny the timing of it.
No. No.
So there is a need, and to defend it and say, well, that's part of history. I think history's great.
You have to learn.
I think that
you have to learn
Auschwitz
from history.
needs to be a museum. I think that what I saw in Rwanda at the genocide sites needs to be there.
Right.
It's horrifying.
But you don't celebrate. There's a difference between remembering
But putting
and
it
celebrating
but putting up a picture of the guy who led a genocide or who led the massacre at a church in a town 500 miles away, that's saying that those lives weren't valuable.
Right, absolutely right.
That we want to celebrate that.
Exactly right.
You know,
Exactly right.
The reconciliation that's had to take place in a nation like Rwanda is amazing. So they had a reconciliation court, which is fascinating, where accusers, they had thousands and thousands of people in prison, and people would come up and they would accuse them, and there were options on how we reconciled. The recognition was that so many people had taken part in the genocide,
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have a country left if you just executed everybody
Yeah.
or left them in prison. And so there was reconciliation courts where people accused, and then the ones who had committed the atrocities were publicly brought out and accused. And there was no curtain. And it was on the accuser to decide whether or not to forgive.
Wow.
We need to be willing to recognize when we're wrong, and we need to be willing to be called out when we're wrong, and then we also have to be willing to ask for forgiveness. You know, it's the same in a relationship. When I yell at my wife about something,
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, I've got to be willing to admit that. I may not want to. It may be uncomfortable. It's never good to, you know. It never feels good. My daughter cries when she does something wrong,
Right.
not because she did something wrong, but because she got caught. But she has to learn to ask for forgiveness.
Certainly.
Because
Certainly.
we have to be willing to just be human. If we really believe that all men are created equal, then who you are shouldn't get you less of a punishment because you can afford it,
Right.
and who you are shouldn't get you an execution because you can't.
I mean, the civil rights movement, it really wasn't that many years ago. Some people say, oh, it's 50 years ago or 60 years ago. And I'm like, that's a speck.
Yeah.
There's no history. That's not history.
Yeah.
That's fresh.
Yeah.
That's a generation and a half. But it's there. It's there.
Sure.
And because America finally did the right thing, we've a generation that grown up with this society, and they don't understand what it was like prior. They can't appreciate it.
And slavery's not dead. We can say slavery's dead.
It comes
but
in
it's
many
not.
forms, my friend.
I mean,
it comes in many forms.
Well, how many people are working in the U.S., quote unquote, and don't have access to their passport because they're working in a home as a housekeeper? How many people are working around the world for free and forced labor and don't have an option to leave?
Well, we're insulated in this country from a lot of that.
And yet it's happening in this country too.
I know, but the average American is insulated. They choose.
Sure, the average American can't afford to have somebody working in their home,
right?
Or can't afford to bring somebody over and then house them and take their passport away.
Right.
But it happens.
Sure, it does.
There are immigrants who are working in this country who don't have the option to where they work.
Right.
It was the massage parlor bust in Murraysville, where she was holding on to the passports.
How long ago was this?
2 years.
Okay.
And she was married to a prison guard who committed suicide, and they said it was a political witch hunt, and who knows. But there are those who will always look to use another human.
Right.
And we have to be cognizantly aware of that. It's there, whether it's traditional slavery and being beaten,
right,
or being trafficked for sex, being trafficked to a Super Bowl. Maybe the best thing that's happened this year is COVID, because there's not a demand for trafficking. I don't know, but you get. People are being busted in massage parlors all the time,
right,
where there's folks who are working not by choice.
Right.
So you got sex trafficking going on, and this isn't the whole QAnon child conspiracy thing right now. I mean, but it's reality. It may not be at the level that some say it is, but it's a reality. You have, if we're going to call out justice and chase down justice, then there's justice on many levels. There's the injustice of children who have been beaten because their dad's out of work and drunk and stuck at home with them, and their only escape before COVID was to go to school.
Those are the hidden COVID victims.
Yeah.
The hidden COVID victims.
I can't begin to imagine
how
many people are suffering from COVID where COVID never even touches the family.
Exactly right.
But the loss of job, the fact that dad's not going to work.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
Beatings are down.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
So, there's, I don't know.
It comes back to, in the end, it sounds like it's oversimplification, but it comes back down to the end that if we lead with humility first, realizing that and I know we were touching on it with some of the southern states and getting rid of that culture of the Confederate flag, that symbol, that requires humility for a lot of people that have been living the Southern way. And I don't mean that in a sinister way. The Southern way is and a lot of the Southern way is wonderful in regards to how nice and charming, and the culture down there. A lot of that is beautiful, but there's also an element of the Southern way. It harkens back to generations prior where people are not treated equally, and some people treated very horribly.
Some of the most progressive drug laws in the country.
That needs to stop.
Regressive drug laws. Guys who are PTSD patients who are military veterans, sitting in jail because they got busted with an ounce, driving through the state.
I get it.
Not in the state, and they've got a medical card. There are drug laws that are on the books that are disproportionately affecting people.
No question.
For minor offenses.
No question.
There's a lot of us who got away with minor stuff when we should have gotten a lot more.
Yeah.
There's a lot who are getting given a lot more punishment that should have had a lot less.
Yeah.
So, it's,
Well,
and we can wrap that into, telling stories and all that stuff. But
no, I get it. I totally get it. And this is good, dude. You need to come back and see me again?
Yeah, man, for sure.
This is we can solve all the world's problems in one day. But man, it's always enlightening conversation too.
I think the big thing is just, we have to be willing to look at our own views,
no doubt,
and challenge them.
No doubt.
And people don't like to be challenged. I don't like to be challenged. I don't like when somebody yells at me and pushes my perspective out of comfort zone.
We need to learn to start being uncomfortable.
But we have to be willing to.
Being uncomfortable.
And we have to recognize that my discomfort isn't the worst thing in the world.
No. But again, I want to believe that we learned this stuff as a child and we've regressed. I don't know the skills.
But I think that we've lost. It used to be that the bully on the playground would hit you and you hit him back.
There's consequences.
There's real
life consequences.
The consequences have gotten much more violent too. We didn't grow up with school shootings. We didn't grow up with
True.
learning how to hide in a classroom.
True.
The bullies bullied on the playground, and then most of the time somebody else bigger than them came and put them in their place.
It was the hierarchy of things, right?
And it is what
But now there's cyberbullying. There's a whole bullying happens in so many forms now.
Yeah, and it's what I wish we had instead of an actual COVID isolation was a social media isolation where it's just Facebook and the internet died for a month. Can you imagine the conversations people start having?
It'd be unbelievable. There would probably be value, and people might find they really like it.
Yeah,
it's.
So I know that I need to be on social media. It's the one thing that I wish I could get away from.
Yeah, it's a marketing thing. I love and hate it. I love keeping in touch with people, and it's a good marketing arm for real estate and for the realtor practice, and obviously this show. But I am well aware of the limit and the limitations. The limitations of social media when it comes to a real human experience. Very limiting. Very limiting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather. I need to learn how to just start sending cards again. I've gotten lazy. I don't send cards
this
anymore.
past year. Yeah, that's my thing.
My wife and I have been talking about doing a Christmas card or a New Year's card for years, and we haven't
do
done
it.
And
handwritten cards are the best.
And it's what makes somebody feel better than just saying, "Hey, I was just thinking about you."
Got it.
Social media is us putting us out there, but it's not nearly as often us connecting with other people.
No.
It's just responding to what they put out there.
It used to mean something when social media was new and fresh because someone reached out to me. It meant something more to us, but now it's lost its specialness. Yeah. It's just part of life now. It's almost, I hate to say it, it's kind of almost expected by some,
Yeah, and why didn't you like my picture? I didn't see your picture, dude. Blame Facebook, but I didn't see it. It's just, why do I have to? And I've got to get better. I've got to just, the thing that I am the worst at in business and in life is connecting if I don't see you in person.
Yeah, keeping in touch. You're not alone. You're not alone.
But it's something that we need to learn. I don't want to do that through social media.
Yeah.
I want to do that through a text to somebody and just go through and just say, "Hey, I was just thinking about you."
Yeah.
Or send an email, "Hey, I saw this. I hope all's well. If there's anything that I can do for you, let me know." If there's a way that I can just
like the
think
text,
about
Dan,
you.
but I tell you, the last year and a half, which has really changed my life since I started this show, is the amount of personal note cards I've sent out, especially the past 8-9 months now.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. It's time consuming. The cost is minimal, but it's time consuming. And I just one note card with a little branding on it, and I flip it over and just. It isn't branding with real estate or the show or anything. It's just my branding, but it's really from me. It's from the heart, and I'm writing something hopefully unique in each one.
Yeah.
Because it is real. It isn't a pre-printed thing. It really is. It's real.
Sure.
It's cathartic to me to actually sit and write them, though.
Yeah.
It's funny. I didn't think I'd get anything out of that. I get a lot out of that.
Yeah.
And they're received very well by people.
That's the most important part is, everybody likes getting a card.
No question. There's no doubt.
And we've just gotten away from the personal connection side of things.
No.
And some folks are great at social media.
No.
Some folks they're able to maintain that authenticity and that connection. I'm not one of them. So I've got to figure out how to connect with people in a way that they want to connect with, that I'm good at as well.
See, it's social media for a reason to be social, but I think we often use it strictly. We tend up leaning and using it more toward business than we probably should. Initially, I think the spirit of how it was initially created probably isn't what it looks like today.
Sure.
Yeah.
All
right, brother.
Hey, man.
Come back, see me again.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Cheers.
Friends, we are out.
Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.